you were the lead researcher on a study that was about fasting called medically supervised water only fasting in the treatment of hypertension. Can you give us some
Yeah.
more information about that?
Well, that was our first study. And the only reason that ever got done was because one of my heroes helped us with it. And his name was T. Colin Campbell from Cornell University. And Dr. Campbell at that time, well, what had happened was he was the first scientist to ever discover dioxin, the active agent in Agent Orange. And he got a massive exposure. And he developed some problems, including dystonia. And we met and he
What's
decided he
dystonia?
wanted,
Is that
he lost the ability to speak properly, he had some neurological symptoms. It was a mess.
wow?
And they told him, well, dioxin poisoning, what are we going to do? So he decided, knowing what he knew about fasting and animal studies, he decided after I talked to him to come to the center and fast, and he did. And to make a long story short, he got well. And this was 30 years ago. Here he is, 90 years old now, still writing books, making huge impacts. But anyway, when he was at the center, he saw the work we were doing with high blood pressure. And he said, let me help you get that published. At that time, he had published, 250 papers in the scientific literature. He took our data back to Cornell and he helped us get it processed, get the analysis done. And ultimately, we were able to get it published in a peer-reviewed journal. And so that was our first publication. The reason I had picked blood pressure was because my uncle, who was a physician, was very negative about this everything about the work I was doing in this type of medicine. And fasting, thought it was terrible. And he actually, when I was 16 years old, told me that I was not to go on a vegan diet, that wasn't healthy, and that I was not to go into alternative medicine, which is what I was saying I wanted to do. And he said that better I should be a communist spy. He thought that was the worst thing that somebody could ever do. And I remember my father took me aside. My father was a pretty serious guy. And he said, Alan, your uncle is a very prominent physician and he doesn't like this alternative medicine stuff. And he said, anything that makes him that upset and angry, well, it can't be bad. So you stick to your guns and good luck to you, son. So he encouraged me. And, but I decided I was going to show my uncle that, so we decided we would do a study on blood pressure. I called him when I was doing osteopathic training in Australia. I said, Uncle, these people with blood pressure are getting better. And he said, no, they're not. I said, no, they're getting better. I'm taking their blood pressure. He says, then you don't know how to take blood pressure. He said, I've been in practice for 50 years. They never get well. So I came back. We got the right equipment. We started to do standardized protocol to measure blood pressure. And sure enough, they were getting better. Dr. Campbell comes along. He helps us publish this paper. So my uncle wouldn't help. He wouldn't look at the data. He said he wouldn't waste his time looking at nonsense until it was published in a peer-reviewed journal. We finally get the paper accepted with Dr. Campbell's help. 2 months before it comes out, he has a massive heart attack, that is my uncle, and dies. And my mother swore he died just so he wouldn't have to admit he was wrong. I don't think that's true. I think he died from the kugel, the kreplach, the knishes, the blintzes, and all the other stuff that he ate. But we'll never know for sure, will we?
Well, maybe he's looking down on you now and going, yep, my nephew Alan was right.
Well, my wife says the entire operation is just to prove I'm right and everybody else is wrong. So, maybe that's true.
That's okay.
How did you get interested in fasting in the first place?
It was mostly Dr. Lyle, our clinical psychologist. I knew him since fourth grade. And he used to beat me terribly in basketball. He was much better. And I thought if I got healthy, I might get an edge. And I started reading some books and I read Shelton. And Shelton said health was the result of healthful living. It was diet, sleep, exercise, and that fasting could help you. So I thought, well, I'll try this diet and see if it would help. And of course it didn't, because Doug adopted the same diet. And here we are, 65 years. This is, 50 years later. He still beats me every time we play. It's really terrible. So it was total failure, but it got me interested in all this. And so, when you talk to people on the spectrum, how some kids are interested in spiders and some are interested in dinosaurs. I happen to be interested in this. And so that's all I've done. I spent my entire life just looking at how to not feed people. It's like.
How wonderful that you and Dr. Lyle have been changing the world together for so many years.
Yeah, it's been very helpful. He was the lead author on our first paper, along with T. Colin Campbell. Otherwise, it never would have gotten done. So he's been helpful. And of course, his work on the pleasure trap was amazing. He's a really bright guy. So I feel very fortunate that we've had his influence. Even if I don't ever tell him I said this though, because that psychology stuff he does, I always poo-pooed that, but it turns out it's actually really helpful.
Really helpful. We'll have him listen to this. There's so many nutrition beliefs and nutrition myths today. Is there one somewhat common nutrition myth that really frustrates you the most? And then what is the truth behind it?
Well, none of it frustrates me because I believe that stress is like Christmas and it's better to give than receive. And I try to be as generous as I can. And as far as the beliefs people have, I understand why they believe what they believe because it's what they want to hear. It's like John McDougall says, people love good news about their bad habits. And so in order to defend your addictions, you have to justify why you're eating salt, oil, and sugar. And to justify your addictions, you have to justify why you're eating chocolate or wine or whatever the heck it is that you're indulging in. And that's usually what drives most people's vehement arguments against a whole plant food SOS-free diet is they just don't like to have to face the fact that, a healthy diet involves whole plant foods rather than, more concentrated processed foods that they would prefer to have because of the pleasure trap. If you really understand the pleasure trap, you understand people are doing the best they can. They can't help it. They're just dealing with their own frustrations, limitations. So I try not to get angry at them. Dr. Lyle explained to me basically how cognitive therapy actually works. And he said, it helps people restructure, what they're seeing and their stresses. For example, if you're in an elevator and somebody starts poking you in the back with a sharp stick, you get angry and you turn around and you think like, what the heck? And you see it's a blind person and they're not trying to hurt you. They're just trying to figure out where they are in space. Your anger goes away. You still step out of the way because you don't like getting poked with a stick, but you're not going to be angry with them because you realize they're doing the best they can. They can't really help it. And so a lot of people you're dealing with that are doing really awful things, it's not they're trying to be awful. It's just they've got limitations, whether it's in their understanding or their experience or their own personal life, whatever. So you try to understand that they're doing the best they can. They're just not being as effective. And so maybe that helps not be so angry. Angry is kind of an expensive emotion. You really don't want to spend too much time angry. Not good for you.